Alright everybody, welcome back to another episode of Procrastinating with Kirby while he talks about whatever he's thinking about this time. I am your host, Kirby White. This is me thinking about thinking emojis. And this time, what we're going to talk about is bad charts. I don't know if you're a little like me and occasionally you come across a chart and it just makes you feel a little yucky inside. Well, we're going to talk about one of those charts today that I came across this week and has distracted me from doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing. So here we are in this together. Let me show you. I was replacing my spark plugs this week and I came across this chart on the back of the package of spark plugs. Now, what this is showing you is that as the spark plugs are driven more miles across the x-axis, that the gap wear changes, and that Autolite double platinum spark plugs are far superior to conventional plugs. They're more durable, they resist wear, they last a lot longer, and therefore are valuable, and you should spend more on those plugs compared to conventional plugs. So that's what this chart is telling us. So let's dig in, and first what I'm going to do is recreate it. Now this is showing all the relevant parts of this, but getting rid of some of the stuff that's distracting. So this is the chart that we're going to use from here on out, and I'll blow it up so we can enjoy it more. And the first problem that we want to talk about that some of you may have already spotted is that when we look at the mileage axis, the x-axis, there's no labels. We have no idea what the scale of this is. And so really, how much distance is there between the far left of the plot to the far right? Is it 100,000 miles? Is it 10,000? A million? We have no idea what the distance is between these. And that means that we can't answer a relatively important question about this, such as how many more miles are the double platinum plugs going to last compared to the conventional ones? Am I getting 100 miles extra out of it or 10,000? Because that might change how much more I'm willing to pay for that product. Now in this graph, with whatever scaling they're using, it looks like there's a big difference. I mean, the conventional plugs only last 1/3 of the distance, while the double platinum ones make it all the way to the other side. So there's a huge discrepancy or difference between the conventional and double platinum, but we actually don't know how much of a difference there is between them. And based on nothing other than what the guy at the shop told me when I picked these up, he said that he put them in his daughter's car a long time ago and then changed them after about 120,000 miles. So with no other information than that, one anecdote of that guy, I'm just going to create, we're going to put our own axes or our own scales on here. We're going to go from 0 to 150,000 miles, just so that we have something to talk about, something to hang our hat on as we're thinking about what data might be underneath this chart. And just so there's no confusion that you're going to learn something from this chart, I'll put that warning tag in the top right saying that this is fictional data and you shouldn't, you're not actually going to get anything out of this. So that's what's going on with our x-axis, the mileage. Now we can, of course, very quickly recognize that the same thing is going on when we think about the y-axis, the gap wear that's up there. Very clearly, we have no scaling. We don't know how much distance there is between the top and the bottom of the chart, and so we cannot answer a fairly simple question like, what's the actual difference in the gap wear between these types of plugs? How much value is there using one over the other? We don't actually know about that. But before we add our own scale to the y-axis, let's think a little bit, because I'm kind of curious, what do we actually mean by gap wear? What are we actually plotting? What is it that we're trying to show here? So let's think about what this might be. For those that are uninitiated, and I count myself among you, I really am in no way qualified to talk about the mechanics of spark plugs, but here is a spark plug, and you can see that there's a gap between what I think is called the electrode and the contact there, and that's the distance that the spark has to jump across in the air to to make the connection and complete the circuit. And as your engine is running, what it's doing is it's bringing gas to the cylinder, it's compressing it, and then bang, you get a spark, and that spark that's jumping across the gap there, that's what ignites the fuel and causes it to explode, and it compresses the piston back and your car goes forward, and yay, that's how everything works. So apparently it's important that this gap be the correct distance, because if it's too great, you have to use too much voltage. If it's too short, well, you might short circuit, or whatever. They just, apparently this is an important distance to pay attention to. And over time, you end up adding a whole bunch of corrosion and rust and things to the spark plug, and it looks like the one that's on the left when we want it to look like the one that's on the right. So as we add wear to the spark plugs, we expect it to look more like the one on the left than the one on the right. So let's go back to our plot, and still, before we add our own scales to this, we need to talk about something else, and that's natural encodings. We are socialized to look at a chart and we intuitively understand and we expect to see that larger, higher, greater values of something is plotted towards the top of a chart compared to the smaller or lower values that are towards the bottom. So think about the last time you saw a bar plot of profits or something at a company. How absurd would it be to plot a quarter with a high amount of profit with record-setting numbers to make that a very small value towards the bottom, but then the quarter that doesn't have very much profit has a big bar that extends all the way to the top. That just would not make any sense to us. We wouldn't. That would cause so much dissonance in us because we wouldn't know how to read the chart. So let's just assume that we're putting larger values on top and smaller ones towards the bottom. And that means we put more wear at the top and less wear at the bottom. And now we have a problem. This is saying that we're actually getting rid of gap wear as we continue driving, that when we get the plugs brand new and they start out fresh from the box, that you put them in and then there's less wear after you drive. That cannot be the case, right? That we're getting rid of wear that shouldn't exist when we open it. So, okay, maybe what we got to do is flip it. We'll put less wear at the top and more wear at the bottom. This is not without precedent. If we were plotting negative numbers, then you would want something that's more negative to be towards the bottom, even though it's farther from zero and technically maybe greater. So it's not that you can't do that, but it's not very easy for us. We don't expect that in most charts. But let's just argue for a second about what it might look like if we do this. Now we are in fact saying that when you buy the spark plugs, you drive and it is accumulating wear over time. That does make sense. But we run into another problem. Let me highlight this horizontal line for us here. And you notice that our double platinum plugs, they start out by going above the line, and then we change directions and we start heading down the same direction that the conventional plugs went. So how can that be? Whatever we mean by gap wear, we're going one direction at first and then we change and go the other direction. And if we're still assuming that here at this far left part of the graph that's zero wear, and that down here we have greater than zero wear, more wear towards the bottom, we have a real problem. Are we really saying that there's this space here where we have less than zero wear, where there's negative wear, where when we pull the plug out of the box, we plug it into our car, there's zero wear on it, and for the first 80,000 miles we drive it, it's actually better than brand new. But then eventually we end up back at this around, I don't know, we'll call it 80,000 miles, and we're back to having a brand new plug after driving it for 80,000 miles, and then we start adding wear to it. This cannot possibly be what's going on in the chart. But unfortunately, I have no idea what could be going on. I don't know enough about cars. I don't know anything about mechanical engineering. I've asked a few people if they have any concept of gap wear and how it might how we can reconcile this chart with what that might mean. All of them end up stumped too. I don't have a happy ending to this video. I don't know what it means. It's just keeping me up at night and distracting me from doing the work that I need to do. So instead, I'm just going to show you a video of Jeremy Clarkson from Top Gear driving a three-wheeled car, because that didn't make any sense, and this chart doesn't make any sense. So let's just stick with the automotive thing and look at things that don't make any sense. Like Mr. Bean sitting in an armchair on top of his car, driving down the road using a mop for the brake pedal and ropes to steer back and forth. That's where I have to leave you, because I don't know what that chart is. So if you happen to know of something that makes sense with this chart, or can explain why this graph looks the way that it does, I'd love to hear it. But until then, cheerio. Have a great week. I hope this chart doesn't keep you up at night the way that it has for me, but maybe it will. And I'll see you next time.